His name was Maulin Rathod. He'd just moved here from India, chasing that whole new life, new beginnings dream, studying, making friends, starting fresh. And tonight, oh my God, tonight was supposed to be his very first day. With a girl he'd met online. Inside, she was already waiting. The house felt weirdly empty, so quiet that it was like the air itself had stopped moving. The only light came from this one dim lamp glowing in the corner, and right there, sitting beneath it, was Jaime Lee Dullahai. At first glance, she looked totally normal. 18 years old, delicate features, those big eyes full of curiosity, and something darker. She stood up, gave him this small, shy smile. They talked, they laughed, they joked around a bit. Everything seemed easy, chill, normal, until she looked him dead in the eyes and said, in this calm, steady voice, "I'm a psychopath." For a second, everything just froze. He laughed nervously, thinking she was kidding. Maybe it was some kind of flirty joke, or even part of a fantasy, but she didn't laugh back, not even a little. So, how did it come to this? How did a simple night between two strangers turn into one of the most chilling true crime cases in Australia's history? To understand that, we need to go back to who they really were before everything went so horribly wrong. Before we dive into the story, I just want to ask you guys to support the channel, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and if you feel like it, share it with someone who loves true crime as much as you do. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more stories like this one. Oh, and while you're watching, drop a comment and tell me where you're from and what the weather's like over there right now. I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. All right, let's get into it. And trust me, this one's chilling. Before this tragedy shook headlines all across Australia, there was Maulin Rathod. He was only 24 that age, when most people are just trying to figure life out, searching for who they are and where they belong. Maulin was an international student from India, living in Melbourne, a city that to him felt like the dawn of endless possibilities. He was calm, focused, the kind of guy who never raised his voice. His friends used to say, "You can't even argue with him, he's always smiling." And it was true. He had that rare gentleness that comes not from weakness, but from pure kindness. He didn't crave attention, didn't try to stand out. He just did his thing quietly and honestly. People loved him for his simplicity, his sincerity, his ability to really listen when everyone else had already turned away. Whenever someone lost a job or bombed an exam, Maulin was the one who'd show up with a cup of tea and say, "Hey, don't worry, you'll get it next time." He loved cricket, followed sports, but could also talk for hours about math, finance, and school. More than anything, he wanted to make his parents proud. A few years earlier, he'd moved to Australia to study accounting. For his parents, Hina and Jagruti, it wasn't just about education, it was a dream come true. Their only son was now living in a country they'd only ever seen in pictures, a place where the future seemed to shine a little brighter for those who worked hard for it. His mother remembered how, as a kid, he'd sit for hours in front of their old computer, looking at photos of Melbourne, the glittering skyscrapers, the soft light by the harbour, the trams gliding down those evening streets. He used to tell her, "One day I'll be there." And when that day finally came, he felt proud, but he never let it go to his head. He called home every few days just to say it was okay, that he was studying hard, working, and that life was good. By mid-2018, Maulin had managed to find a balance between work and school. It wasn't easy. New country, new language, new culture, but he was doing it. He'd built a small but close group of friends, mostly other international students like him, all trying to build something new, far from home. They'd hang out after class, swap stories about their families, joke about how hard it was to nail that Aussie accent, and laugh about how nobody here ever says good evening. They just go, "Hey mate." Maulin was always the first to laugh, easily, warmly, without effort. Everyone who knew him said the same thing. He was the kind of person who'd help you out, even when he was struggling himself. One of his friends remembered once saying,
He was a very humble personality, very jolly nature. He used to crack jokes and he loved to play cricket.
"People like him don't cast big shadows, they leave behind warmth." And maybe that's what made what happened later so unbearably cruel. Because Maulin was the last person you'd ever imagine meeting death, in a place meant for something as simple as a date. He was always the same, polite, calm, mindful of every little detail, careful about how he spoke and what he said. Even when someone interrupted him, he never got upset. He'd just smile and nod. Everyone who knew him said being around him felt peaceful. He had that quiet balance that comes from people who aren't trying to impress anyone. They just are. But even people like that have their quiet moments. Those late nights when you're sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and suddenly realize there's no one around. That's when it hits you, that soft kind of loneliness, the one that doesn't hurt all at once, but slowly presses on your heart. One of his friends later said that's when Molin started talking about dating. He wasn't looking for something huge, wasn't talking about love at first sight or anything like that. He just wanted to meet someone kind, someone to laugh with, to go to the movies with, grab a coffee, share a moment. And one night, almost without thinking, he downloaded a dating app, Plenty of Fish. He didn't expect much. It was just a way to meet people, to fill the kind of silence that sometimes felt too loud. Then came a simple notification, a new match, and there she was. A photo of a young woman appeared on his screen. A soft, bright smile, a simple bio that said, "I love animals, I hate lies." Her name was Jaime. They started chatting, short, easy messages. "Hey, how are you? I'm new here, still figuring out how this thing works." She wrote calmly, not pushy, with that slight vulnerability that makes you want to trust someone. Molin felt like she was probably lonely too. She told him she wasn't looking for a relationship, just some company, someone to talk to, maybe watch a movie with, spend an evening without feeling alone. And he replied simply, but warmly, "Whatever you want, we'll do that." It sounded normal, friendly. He couldn't have known how differently those words would be read later. They agreed to meet at her place, a quiet, ordinary suburb called Sunbury, about half an hour northwest of Melbourne, the kind of neighbourhood where people still leave their doors unlocked till midnight and greet their neighbours by name at the local store. That evening, Molin was in a good mood. His friends later said he even cracked a few jokes before heading out, smiling as he locked the door to his apartment. There wasn't a hint of worry in him, not the slightest sign that this night would be anything other than what it seemed. But while he was driving through the dark suburban roads, just a few miles away, in a house with only one light on, Jaime Lee Dolahai sat in silence. The glow of her computer screen was the only light in the room. No music, no movie, just her staring into the empty screen. She knew the evening was getting close. Her fingers kept tapping the keyboard, then freezing midair, like she was arguing with herself. There was that calm before the storm, the kind that almost hums in the silence. When detectives later went through her computer, they were stunned. What they found in her search history looked like pieces of someone's broken mind. Guides, dark forums, disturbing phrases, all of it forming this twisted mosaic of thoughts. Her hard drive had basically become a mirror of her psyche. And still, to say that Jaime Lee Dolahai was born a monster wouldn't be true. She wasn't always like this, at least not from the start. Her former teachers remembered her as a quiet, shy little girl. She used to sit in the back of the classroom, drawing animals, dogs, horses, birds, and saying that one day she wanted to work with them. She didn't have many friends, but she always tried to help people, bring her teachers little drawings, not for a grade, but just to make them smile. All she really wanted was for someone to love her, but there was no love at home, only yelling, indifference, and sometimes violence. What should have been her childhood turned into a battlefield, and somewhere in that chaos, she lost her belief that the world could ever be a safe place. When she was little, Jaime Lee was that quiet kid who stayed in the corner. She drew animals, stayed out of trouble, barely spoke. Teachers remembered how, when they praised her, her eyes would light up, just for a second, like a candle flickering in the wind. She just wanted to be seen, to hear someone say, "You're a good kid, it's gonna be okay." But it was never okay. That house wasn't filled with warmth, just shouting, doors slamming, fear. There were no hugs, no comfort, only that constant tension. Some days, they'd lock her in a room. Some nights, she'd crawl under the blanket, hoping nothing bad would happen this time. What others called home was her prison, and that prison left scars that would never fade, not on her skin, but deep in her mind. Psychiatrists later said that even as a child, Jaime's sense of self was fractured. She didn't know who she was, good or bad, victim or threat. When she turned 10, the state stepped in. Social services removed her from her parents, trying to save her. But even that rescue didn't give her peace. She ended up in foster care, new walls, new faces, new rules. Her life had restarted, but the ghosts inside her came along for the ride. Doctors who saw her back then said the signs were already there. Something deep, broken, volatile. They called it a severe personality disorder. She was incredibly impulsive. Her moods could flip in seconds. Quiet and calm one moment, furious the next, rage turning into tears, and then almost instantly a smile like nothing had happened. Her mind was described as a stream, not calm or clear, but wild, overflowing, where thoughts, fears, desires, and pain all collided into one endless storm. She could hurt herself, then moments later cry and whisper apologies to herself, to anyone nearby. One psychiatrist put it this way: her brain was like an endless echo chamber. Every emotion, every thought bounced back and multiplied until she got completely lost in the noise. When Jaime turned 14, she was moved into a supported housing program, a small home with 2 full-time caregivers. It wasn't exactly an institution, more like a place where she simply wasn't allowed to be alone, because for her, being alone was dangerous. She had structure there: therapy, supervision, a strict daily routine. Her life was scheduled down to the minute: when to wake up, when to take her meds, when to go for a walk. And even with that much control, she was still unpredictable. Her medical file at that time was thicker than any school record you've ever seen. The mental health team documented more than 100 hospitalizations. 100 times she had hurt herself. 100 times she said she couldn't stop. 100 silent cries for help that eventually stopped shocking even her caregivers. And yet, even in all that chaos, she had this strange ability to be gentle. Psychologists said Jaime could be kind, sincere, even sweet when she felt safe. She had this childlike innocence. She could look at someone she'd met only a day ago and ask, "Do you love me?" She kept searching for warmth in places that had none. People who worked with her often talked about 2 Jaimes. One was calm, smiling, soft-spoken. The other dark, angry, completely unpredictable. Jaime herself called that second side the demon. Her social media started to reflect it. One post read, "Sometimes, when no one's watching, my demon comes out to play. I try to fight it, but it keeps getting stronger." Another one said, "She says life hurts, that there's no point in fighting. She'll never let anyone stop her, and if they try, she'll make them feel pain." The posts were terrifying, but at the same time, they sounded like a desperate cry for help. Someone drowning in pain with no idea how to escape it. Her caregivers tried not to panic. They were used to her emotional swings, from tears to rage, from silence to screaming. They told themselves it was just teenage moodiness, something that would fade with time, but neither they nor Jaime herself could have known that one day that demon would actually come out and no one would be able to stop it. Then, in early 2018, everything changed. Jaime turned 18, and with that number came a harsh dose of reality. The system that had protected her, watched her, and literally kept her alive was required to step back. The 24/7 supervision she had depended on for years ended. Her case files were updated, and she was transferred to an independent living program. Her former caregivers pleaded, begged, "She's not ready, please don't leave her on her own." There were letters, phone calls, warnings from doctors, but bureaucracy doesn't bend for compassion. When the funding stopped, so did the support. And just like that, the safety net vanished. Jaime found herself completely alone. For the first time in her life, her little house in the suburb of Sunbury became her entire world. At first, it looked like freedom. Her own keys, her own space, a room she could decorate however she wanted. But for someone whose mind hung by a thread of structure and control, freedom was the beginning of collapse. Without that structure, things started slipping. She'd skip her meds sometimes, forget her appointments, and those dark thoughts, they started coming more and more often. The routine disappeared, and the noise in her head grew louder. She had started talking about what she called her bad thoughts. She messaged the few people who were still in touch with her, former caseworkers, counsellors, writing things like, "I feel really sick from all these bad thoughts. I want to call the police, but they won't believe me." It wasn't just a cry for help, it was her way of clinging to the edge. And the reply she got back was chillingly brief, almost detached. "Trust your judgment." 3 words. To a desperate mind, they sounded less like reassurance and more like permission. No one realised then just how fatal that message would become. In her mind, the idea of 2 selves was taking root. The good one she wished she could be, and the other one darker, angrier, unpredictable. She talked about it so casually, like describing 2 roommates living inside her head. One's good, one's bad. They're both me. I'm just scared of the bad one. And that bad one kept getting louder, especially when she was alone. With no meds, no therapy, appointments, no one to notice how far she was slipping. Soon, the regression began. She spent more and more time online, looking for meaning but finding only darkness. Chat forums about power games, violent videos, searches about ways to take someone's breath away. Her browser history turned into a roadmap of descent, how to trick someone, how long it takes to lose consciousness, ways to stop breathing without pain. Each search was a silent alarm, but there was no one left to hear it. Then came July 23rd, 2018. A new message popped up from a stranger on a dating app. His name was Molin. He was just a regular guy, kind, curious, a little nervous about the date, but genuinely sweet. For him, it was supposed to be a normal evening, a chance to meet someone, maybe make a friend, maybe something more. He had no idea that behind that friendly smile and a few innocent messages was a storm waiting to break. It was early evening in Sunbury. The air was cool, the streets quiet, the kind of suburban calm where the wind moves through the trees and every sound feels louder than it should. Inside the small house, Jaime sat curled up on the couch, knees to her chest, staring at the glowing screen in front of her. On it was his face, Molin's profile picture. They'd only exchanged a few messages, just enough to spark her curiosity and his hope. For her, that was enough. Another chance to test the edge, to see if the other one would come out. For him, it was a chance for company, a small rush of excitement mixed with nerves. But her mind was already spiraling. Her search history from the past few days was darker than ever. The kind of phrases that made it clear she was moving, from thought to intention. She even sent a message to one of her former guardians, another plea for help, another chance to be stopped. And again, she got the same 3 words, trust your judgment. She took it as permission, or maybe as a final verdict. So when her phone buzzed again, a message from Molin saying he was on his way and a little nervous, she replied softly, almost playfully, that she liked games, but it was all just fantasy, that she wanted to try something new. For him, it sounded strange but exciting. They even talked about a safety signal, that he should knock if things ever felt too intense. The irony of that is almost unbearable. A rule meant to keep him safe, a signal that could have saved his life, would soon become meaningless. They were both thinking about the same thing, just in completely different ways. He thought he was walking into a date. She thought she was walking into a test, one that might finally prove what her other self could do. Neither of them realized this would be the last night he'd ever have the chance to change his mind. All he had to do was knock, and she was supposed to stop. At least that's what they agreed on. It all sounded safe enough, even thoughtful, like 2 people setting rules for a harmless game. Around 9 o'clock that night, Molin parked his car outside a small suburban home. The quiet felt almost heavy. A single lamp glowed faintly behind the curtain, and a cold wind brushed over his car hood. He glanced at his phone, typed a quick message, "I'm here." A minute later, the front door opened. There she was, standing in the doorway, dressed in sweats, lit by a soft yellow light. With that small, almost childlike smile, she stepped aside and said quietly, "Come in." He followed her inside. The house was warm, but the air felt still. No TV, no music, just the sound of 2 people breathing. The room was tidy, but almost empty. A couch, a small table, a lamp, and a few scattered sheets of paper. Everything about it felt strange, like time itself had stopped. They talked a little about school, movies, even the weather. Molin was kind, attentive, doing what he always did, being polite. And then, out of nowhere, she looked straight into his eyes and said quietly, "I think I'm a psychopath." She didn't say it like a joke, or even like a confession. She said it like a fact, something to simply accept. He gave her this awkward smile, unsure how to react. "That's okay," he said, trying to break the tension, make it light. To anyone watching from the outside, that would have been a massive red flag, a flashing warning sign. But to him, in that moment, it just felt odd. He thought it was still just a date. Everything still seemed under control. Then, as she would later tell detectives, Jaime slowly moved behind him. She said, "Relax, it's just part of the game." Molin nodded. He trusted her. She wrapped her arms around him gently, at first. A few seconds passed, then her grip began to tighten. "If I knock, you let go," he reminded her. "Yeah," she said quietly, but she didn't let go. He tapped once, then again, Her fingers only tightened. I just kept squeezing harder and harder. She would later tell investigators. Then I whispered in his ear, "It's okay." His body tensed. He tried to push away, but she held on tight. When her arms began to ache, she reached over to the nightstand and grabbed the cord from a massage device. She did it calmly, without shouting, without panic. I told him I was sorry. She said in a soft, almost gentle voice, and I just kept going. A few minutes later, it was over. Molin's life had ended.
A Indian student has been killed after an online date went terribly wrong.
The victim has been identified as Morlan Rathod, a 25-year-old accountant living here in Melbourne on a student visa. He died in Sunshine Hospital overnight after being found critically injured on Monday night. He'd gone to a house in Sunbury to visit a 19-year-old woman who lived alone at the address. The visit arranged through an internet dating site. The woman's home was a supported residential service, visited frequently by carers, and neighbours told me this afternoon that police too were frequent visitors to the address to quell noisy and sometimes violent disturbances there.
She sat right next to him. She didn't cry, didn't run around, didn't try to cover up what had just happened. She just stared at one spot, frozen. Then she quietly picked up her phone and called the police. The operator answered and immediately recognised her name. Jaime Dolihai. They already knew her. Her history, her breakdowns, her file. She wasn't new to the system. Her voice was calm, steady. "I killed someone," she said. He didn't seem scared. He's lying on my bed. "I feel nice. I don't want to be a killer." Then came silence, just a few seconds. And she added, "I knew I'd kill him if he came." When officers arrived, the door was wide open. The house was still heavy. Jaime was sitting on the floor, calm, almost hollow. Her hands were resting on her knees, eyes fixed on the ground. If you could call it an emotion, it wasn't panic, it was this eerie relief, like she'd finally done something she always knew she would. That night, during the interrogation, she told detectives, "One's bad, one's good, they're both me." She explained that she'd warned him, that she'd wanted someone to stop her, that she didn't actually want this to happen, but no one listened. And then she admitted she liked it, not the killing itself, but the feeling that, for once in her life, someone finally believed there was something dark inside her. "I knew I wouldn't get better until someone stopped me," she said. "I just didn't want to do it again." And right there, the woman who had begged for help for years finally got it. But it cost another person his life. Later, the courtroom would fall completely silent. Reporters, families, spectators, everyone just sat there waiting for the verdict on a young woman who had been screaming for help for years, and no one had heard her. The morning was heavy. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, but it couldn't clear the weight in the air. People showed up early, journalists took their places with cameras, families broken and hollow filled the benches. And there she was, Jaime Lee Dolihai, sitting at the defense table in black. Her hair neatly braided, in front of her colored pencils and sheets of paper, small traces of childhood clinging to her at the darkest point of her life. Most of the time, she just drew flowers, tiny figures, little sketches of animals, the same thing she'd drawn since she was a kid. It looked almost innocent, painfully out of place. Someone whispered that maybe it was her way of coping, a small escape into something pure when the world around her was anything but. The prosecution went first. The prosecutor's voice was steady, firm, each word landing like a hammer. He laid out the story with brutal clarity. Planning, intent, execution. She knew exactly what she was doing, he said. Then he painted the picture for the jury, the online searches, the preparation, the chosen method, the setup disguised as a game. He reminded them that Molin had come there in good faith, that he trusted her, and that trust had cost him his life. The prosecutor pulled out his arsenal of digital evidence, search histories, fake profiles, misleading messages. He read her words out loud. "I'm going to kill someone tonight just for fun. 10 steps to commit murder and get away with it." For him, these weren't just words, they were blueprints. And turning to the jury, he said, "This was never random, this was a plan." Molin, he argued, had been chosen not by chance, but by design. He was a tool, not the goal. Then it was the defense's turn. His voice was quieter, but just as determined. He didn't deny the facts, didn't twist the timeline, didn't pretend the act hadn't happened. Instead, he told a different story, the story of a person who was already broken long before she ever had a choice. "Miss Dolihai is not just a criminal," he said. "She's a young woman, deeply traumatized, whose mind is a storm of terrible thoughts and emotions." Step by step, he walked the jury through her life, the violent childhood, the foster care system, the loss of supervision at 18, the endless hospitalizations, the impulsive breakdowns, and the way her sense of me and the other one blurred into one. Court psychiatrists became the key witnesses. For days, they tried to explain how her mind worked. One called it a chaotic storm, a phrase that stuck with everyone in the room. Another admitted her empathy was limited, but insisted that didn't mean she felt no remorse. In her fragmented state, they said, she sometimes did understand she was causing pain, and sometimes she even regretted it. It was messy, complex testimony. The doctors agreed there was intent, but also that her mental illness had a massive impact on her control. The jury listened closely. Days of questioning, hundreds of pages of medical records, witness statements, expert opinions. It was overwhelming. The pressure in the air was heavy. Whatever they decided would not only change one woman's life, but also define how society chooses to deal with those who are deeply mentally ill, whether it punishes them or helps them. Finally came the verdict. Not guilty of murder with intent, but guilty of manslaughter. The judge weighed both sides, the facts and the mental state, and spoke words that carried both condemnation and compassion. You took the life of a person who did nothing to harm or provoke you. We can only imagine the terror he felt when he realized you wouldn't let go. And then, softly but firmly, your guilt is significantly diminished by your illness and the profound deprivation you suffered as a child. The sentence, 9 years in prison, with credit for time already served in isolation. The judge noted that she could be eligible for parole in just over 3 years. The words hit hard. For Mullen's parents, it wasn't justice, it was paperwork. It didn't bring their son back. When the verdict was read, Jaime just stared at her hands blank, emotionless. Somewhere in the courtroom, someone started crying, others just covered their faces. Outside the courthouse, Mullen's parents stood close together, holding on to each other like it was the only thing keeping them upright. His mother, her voice quiet but steady, told reporters, "He was our only child. We just hope no one ever has to go through what we did." One's it. Her words echoed every loss that no court decision could ever fix. On the defense table, the sketches Jaime had drawn during the trial were left behind: small flowers, animals, harmless shapes. They stayed untouched, silent witnesses to the world inside her. Child-like drawings beside an adult tragedy. That contrast, bright colours against darkness, became the symbol of this entire case. Outside the courtroom, Mullen's parents held each other in silence. They talked about the phone call from Australia the moment their world stopped. After 12 days of waiting, their son's body was flown home, and for his mother, it wasn't relief. It was a new kind of pain. She spent hours beside his coffin, running her hand through his hair, unable to let go. In Melbourne, the case sparked outrage and reflection. People were asking, how could this happen? How could all the signs, the messages, the disturbing searches, the cries for help be ignored or brushed aside? How did a system built to protect the vulnerable leave her completely alone? For many, the answer was painful. The warnings were all there, but no one acted. The texts, the posts, the calls, they were heard, but not listened to. Families of victims and mental health advocates began calling for reform. They demanded more funding, better aftercare for young adults, aging out of supervision, and a new approach for people who openly say, "I'm dangerous to myself and others." One psychiatrist who testified later summed it up perfectly. Jamie was emotionally a child trapped in the body of a young adult who never got the help she needed when it mattered most. Justice in this case had two sides, the criminal and the human. The criminal side gave a sentence. The human side asked whether our systems are built to heal, not just punish. When two lives, one of a young man searching for connection and one of a young woman crying out for help, collided that night, what followed was tragedy for everyone involved. And even after the verdict, one haunting question remained. When she gets out, will Jaime finally get the help she always needed? Or will she once again be left alone with the very demon that started it all? Mullen's parents still light candles for their son, who dreamed big, worked hard, and lost his life in the very place he thought he was finding a new beginning. And everyone who's heard this story is left with the same thought: listen more closely to cries for help before it's too late to change the ending.